Welcome, everyone. My name is Gretchen Rowe, and it's my great pleasure to have the opportunity to have a conversation with my colleague, Lisa Chimento, about what your back to school journey might look like with a Demme Learning product. We have so much information to share with you, and so many of you registered and asked us questions. We want to make sure that we answer as many questions as possible. By way of introduction, I am the community liaison for Demme Learning. I homeschooled 6 kids, 21 years. 5 of them are college graduates, and the last one, the caboose in our train, is a senior in high school. And I'm going to let my esteemed colleague Lisa introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Lisa Chimento. I am a customer success consultant and placement specialist here at Demme Learning. I've been with the company for 5 years full-time. Before that, I worked at the homeschool conventions and had an opportunity to meet face-to-face so many customers and learn such a great deal about all of you and from you as well. I homeschooled my 4 children for 25 years. We did use Matthew C. during those years, and I'm so thankful for it. We didn't have the privilege of having spelling UC, Analytical Grammar, and WriteShop at that time. They weren't available, but I can see the great benefit that they have been to homeschooling families since then, and I'm so thankful that we're carrying those products now as well. I work from my home here in Florida, and so it's been a privilege to work remotely with other colleagues and get a chance to learn from them and learn from you as well. This is going to be a great talk.
And Lisa, one of the questions that we were asked, I want to begin with, why did you choose to homeschool?
Oh, yeah. When my firstborn was born back in 1989, I had never even heard of homeschooling before. And over the next 2 or 3 years, I had the opportunity to meet some families who were homeschooling. And I was astonished. I didn't even know it was a thing, and spent time with them, spent time with their kids, and got a chance to know them and learn so much from them. By the time Matt we were ready to start thinking about school for him, I came to the conclusion that I would need to hear the auditory voice of God telling me not to homeschool. I was so convinced that I would be able to do the best for him that I could, because I would have the knowledge of what he'd be learning and how he'd be learning it. And I was so excited about it. He was such a bright, eager boy, so like a sponge. And so we actually were doing things, from the time he could talk. And then we just launched into it and never looked back. It has been one of the few things in my life that I've had zero regrets about. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but on the whole, I was so thankful to have had the privilege to do it.
And unlike Lisa, I was not a principled homeschooler. I became a homeschooler overnight in the middle of the calendar year, when I felt my 3rd grader was being failed by the school system. And so I laughingly say I homeschooled 1 year at a time for 21 years. We graduated 4 from homeschooling. Our 5th was homeschooled to high school, and our last was homeschooled to middle school. I wouldn't have traded those 21 years for anything. When you come to the homeschool journey, you come for lots of reasons, and many of you who are joining us or who are going to be watching this webinar in its recording each have your own reason for being here. Let me tell you, to make one statement about it, it's a very worthwhile journey.
Yeah.
We have lots of information to share with you, and so that we can stay on track, we have prepared a PowerPoint, so I'm going to put that up. Lisa is going to be our presenter here, and it is going to be terrific, and I'm very excited. I'm the questioner and she's the presenter, so we're going to get started. We want you to make some wise decisions for your homeschool journey. And so toward that end, we want to explore how Demme Learning's products can help you in that process. The first one, of course, we're going to speak about is our flagship product, and that is Matthew C. And we have some points we want to make, and Lisa's going to make those points to you. So Lisa, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, as you saw in the picture, we've got a lot of levels of Matthew C, from primer all the way through high school calculus. And this has been a marvelous thing to see take place. Steve Demme created this product about 35 years ago. He was a school math teacher. And then when he and his wife began homeschooling their boys, he got involved with some co-op groups, and he was teaching math classes at the co-ops. And the parents there were so thrilled because their kids were learning so well. They began asking him for worksheets, and then he eventually compiled them together into books. They've evolved over the years until they are what you see today with the lower Greek level series that cover from Alpha through Zeta. They cover the first through sixth grade levels of math, but in a different sequence than you would see in a grade-based program. Math UC is a skills-based program. It uses multi-sensory activities to help students see the concepts concretely and visually so that they can better understand them. So because of this, you see Greek letters instead of grades. And so what we do when we speak with parents is ask them, what do your children know? What is their highest level of proficiency? And let's start them there. We don't deal with where should your child be. We say, where is your child? And we want to meet them where they are and then help them progress from that point forward. The activities that are used to learn the math concepts engage so many different senses. And so we're not just teaching them how to solve problems on paper, we're teaching them the why behind the math. Because when they know the why, then they can solve word problems. And that's the goal here. That's probably a terrifying word for many of you, but word problems is life application of math skills. And that's what we want our children to be equipped with. So what happens with Math UC is because we are not grade-based, we don't have a preset schedule that you have to follow. You'll be following your students' pace. So whether it takes them 1 or 2 days to master a concept or 1 or 2 weeks, you stick with them. The parade is not going to march on without them. We want them to know that they will have the time that they need to be confident with the work that they're doing before moving to the next challenge.
I think one of the things that's really important to recognize is placement is a critical tool with Math UC, because we're looking for what your student knows and where their knowledge ends. So we've provided you with the link here for the placement, and we suggest that you avail yourself of that. If it gives you answers that you're not sure about, that's where folks like Lisa, myself, and the team come into play. We want you to be successful, so we encourage you to reach out to a placement specialist to seek what my colleague Sue calls clarity. And that is so important in the process because we want your success as much as you want to be successful. One of the most important things to understand about Math UC is it is a different kind of curriculum. Most homeschool curricula were developed in a classroom and then adapted to homeschool. Why is this important to you? Well, the truth of the matter is classroom instruction is different than homeschool instruction. When you instruct a child at home, you are in a one-on-one tutorial situation. And you can tell, as Steve says, when the lights come on in their eyes and you know how to move forward. In a classroom situation, the teacher, her pace is guided by the way the curriculum is designed. And that's why Math UC has a different design, because we want to wait until understanding is achieved, and we want both sides of the coin. We want conceptual understanding and we want applicative understanding so that your student can be successful. Next, I'd like to move into talking about our special products. Now, these are not levels of Math UC. AIM stands for Accelerated Individualized Mastery, and AIM for addition and subtraction, and AIM for multiplication are interventions. And Lisa's going to give you a little bit more information about them.
Yeah, very often when you go to the placement tool and you start working through that questionnaire with your student, you may find that it places your student in either the alpha or gamma levels, but there's a special note there that says, if you feel that your student has been placed here because only because they have not yet mastered the facts for that level. You want to check out the AIM products. So AIM for addition and subtraction and AIM for multiplication are interventions. They are not part of the regular Math UC sequence, and they don't take a whole school year to go through. What will happen is we're working to help students master the math facts. And lots of folks question us about that because they say, oh, well, I count on my fingers and I'm fine. But you need to put yourself into the position of a student who is in a learning situation, and they are going to be continuing to get concepts presented to them that are higher and higher in difficulty, in abstractness, and in complexity. And to not have those facts mastered ahead of time is like asking a child who's still learning to sound out the letters of words what the context of a paragraph is. There's no way their brain can focus on it because they've been so focused on the individual components. And it's like that with math facts. So we want students to get those facts mastered. And it's more difficult for some students than others, but it has been a game changer for children who historically have had difficulty mastering the facts. Again, it uses multisensory activities. It is not a workbook program that the student does independently. This will be a parent and student interaction where you are going to be spending short sessions once or twice a day. And we kind of nag you about 15-minute sessions because that's the student's neurological ability to be able to understand and retain material. What we're after here is long-term retention of those facts so that they can then bring them into their math work as tools. There is both a physical kit that is provided to you when you order an AIM set, and there is an online component called the digital pack. So you do have to have both components. The complete set for each of these courses includes both of those components. And so you do have to have access to online instruction there. And the modeling videos that are provided are marvelous. So you're not going in without knowing what you're going to be doing. You're going to be able to see exactly what you and your student will be doing together. The first lesson may take time. It's the most facts in that lesson, especially for AIM for addition and subtraction. So don't rush it. This is really, again, student paced. And so if you have questions, our support team is here to answer them. Please don't hesitate to call.
Let me also say, before we move on, that there are parents who ask questions about this, particularly some of you with teenagers who are concerned that this feels like you're starting over, and you're not. I have to tell you, you would be amazed at the things that will fall in place behind the acquisition of a fact set. And some of you made commentary about having children with dyslexia. I am myself the parent of 2 dyslexics, and I have to tell you that that mastered fact set made all the difference in the world. We've been fed a myth about kids with dyslexia saying they can't memorize. And the truth of the matter is, where desire and high interest meet, there are lots of things they can commit to memory. What we're going to do is use the neurological capacities that have been discovered by researchers to walk them along a continuum to be successful mathematically. And even if you can commit 25% more facts to memory, that's 25% less time you have to step away from a problem in the process. And it makes all the difference in the world. So if the placement tool that you see here has suggested that AIM is appropriate for your children, please consider it. It's a huge game changer. Now, Lisa, let's move on and talk about our next materials, which of course is my heart, my favorite. I love this. It has been such a giant game changer. Spelling UC has been around now for only 8 years, but my goodness, the number of families for whom it has been revolutionary. So I'll let you talk about this program.
Yeah, Spelling UC has been such an exciting piece, a part of our family of products. Dr. Karen Halinga developed Spelling UC. She's a reading recovery specialist up in the Ohio area. And after working many years with her students and helping them to learn to read, she assumed that their spelling would just fall in place automatically. And she was a little surprised to find that it didn't. For many students, they could become prolific readers and still be poor spellers. And I know that many parents are very puzzled by that. I was, my daughter in particular was a tremendous reader and is a writer to this day, but her spelling was kind of hilariously bad. It became family entertainment at some times. And so there are two different skills going on there. They take place in two different parts of the brain. When you are learning to read, you can learn phonetically for the most part because you have context in your reading, but there is no context for spelling. A student hears a word and has to just conjure up the correct spelling of this with no context to help. And the English language is complex. It has contributing languages and they all have their own phonetic rules. So once you get past single syllable short vowel sounds, all bets are off. Nearly 50% of the most commonly used words break the rules. So we step away from phonetic spelling after the first level and a half. So you see the listen and write does work phonetically. It uses letter boxes. And this is for students who are just beginning to read. And then for the first half of Jack and Jill, we continue to use those letter boxes, but then we step away from phonetic spelling and move into building long-term visual memory of words. And again, we're using multisensory activities because the more senses you engage in an exercise, the better chance the brain has to take that information, recognize the importance of it, and imprint it for long-term retention. Again, we're dealing with a skills-based program, so there are no grade levels on these. There is a very good placement tool online. You'll see the link to it up at the top of that slide, and it will help you to figure out where your student places. And we want to know not only, well, there's a passage there that you'll have for the student to read. They need to be able to read it fluently. The reading at each level should be very easy for a student. We don't want their brain to be focusing on having to sound out words and figure out what they are when they're reading. So it's intentional that the reading passages are very, very easy. And then there will be multisensory activities, chunking, listening, copy work, dictation. And they're intended to be short lessons. Again, that short period of time is so useful for long-term retention. There are these levels follow the stages of spelling development, and the longest level covers from about midway through level B all the way through level F. And then level G goes into the next stage of spelling from there. If you are just starting spelling, you see, no matter where your child is, don't place them higher than level E. That way they'll be able to grasp some of the concepts that are taught at that level before proceeding on.
One of the things I think that is very important to recognize is we have eliminated tests and word lists. It's because neurologically, the research tells us that they don't work. Many of you have children who have used more than one spelling program, and perhaps you have a child who performs excellently on that test, but then can't reproduce those words 3 weeks later. And that's because we know that the brain treats a list of words as item memory, and it only retains that list as long as necessity dictates, which in this case is the test. So we often say to kids, if we could teach you to spell successfully without using a word list and without having a test associated with it, would you be interested? And we're always delighted when the student says, yes, absolutely. Check out Spelling UC. I think you'll be glad that you did. Now we want to move on to talk about our grammar component. And a couple of you specifically said you wanted to understand why grammar. Why do we have to do this? And tell us more about analytical grammar. And I have a beloved colleague named Amy who says, grammar, the difference between dad ate pizza being a very short 3-word sentence and pizza ate dad being something that is just kind of funny and bizarre. And the truth of the matter is we learn grammar to become successful writers. And so analytical grammar helps us launch a student into an analysis of English so that they can become successful compositional writers. Lisa's going to tell you more about that.
Yes, and again, there is a placement tool for analytical grammar. It's quite easy. The main course, those green books that you see, that is the original analytical grammar course, and it was designed for a student who has a reading level of 6th grade or higher. Years later, parents began to ask the author for something for younger children, and she lifted the first 10 lessons of the green books, and she brought the reading level down to 4th grade and published junior analytical grammar, followed by the mechanics course. The junior course is a basic grammar course that can be completed in a year. The main course, analytical grammar, can be completed over the course of portions of 3 school years, which she calls seasons. And there is a lot of flexibility with this because people are starting grammar at different levels. There is no assumption that the student has had any prior formal grammar instruction. It's perfectly okay if they haven't. They can still use the green analytical grammar course. If they are older, say in high school, and they're attempting it for the first time, they may need to do it over a single year or maybe 2 school years, but you can do it over as many as 3. And like I said, lots of flexibility in there. The coursework is such that there is a page of notes that the parent and the student would work through together, identifying the new concept that's being taught, and then 3 pages of practice to bring them through the week, and then a test at the end. There are helpful rubrics in analytical grammar to help students know what is expected of them when the assignment includes a writing portion, so that they know what is expected in that writing assignment in order to produce an A grade in it, for instance. And that's really helpful. It's going to help them learn how to self-edit and become more independent writers. Let me see what else. Did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. But like we've said here, the goal is to build a grammarian's notebook. So the tests are open book because grammar does have a large subjective component. And I think that's why a lot of you don't want to teach it, because it's subject to interpretation. And I'm reminded when we first debuted analytical grammar, I had a conversation with a parent who said she was really struggling with her 13-year-old because he was arguing about the placement of a prepositional phrase. And I said, I'm going to stop you there for just a hot minute. Feature the idea that your son is actually arguing with you about where a prepositional phrase can go, which means he understands that you can move it around in the sentence, and that means you have success. And that's really what we're looking for in this program, is for you to have grammatical success with your student. And I think you'll find that with this program. I've used it with 3 of my children. I've never used the 3-year sequence. We always did it in a year because I was always late to the game. So they were all 9th. Well, one was a 9th grader, one was a 10th grader, and one was an 11th grader. And we still had an enormous amount of success with the program. And I think you'll find it to be the same.
I missed one thing that I wanted to say. If you are using it as a 2 or 3 year program, you'll also want to get the reinforcement and review book. This way, while they're not actually working on active lessons, they have an opportunity to keep those skills fresh. And it's just doing 1 page every other week for the remainder of that school year until you pick up the next season's work. And then when they have completed analytical grammar, they may be in 7th or 8th or 9th grade. And now you've still got some review time that you can use. And there are high school reinforcement books that are available that present sentences in the context of great literature, American authors, British authors, world authors, and Shakespeare's plays. So it gives the students a chance to really get a flavor for wonderful literature while they're refreshing and reviewing their grammar skills.
Right. Take a look at the program. And of course, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to be in touch with us. Now we want to talk about our newest acquisition. And I have to tell you, I have fallen in love. For 15 out of my 21 years, I taught creative writing in a co-op and a co-op setting. And it was a wonderful experience. I was not familiar with WriteShop, but I wish I had found it, because I love the fact that it's not a prescriptive program. In other words, it doesn't determine what your student will write about. that's up to your student to determine. So briefly, we're going to go through and show you the 3 ways WriteShop is divided. And then Lisa is going to give you some things to think about as you seek to place your child within the program. First, we have WriteShop Primary, which is for elementary school students. And the placement tool that we will reference here at the end will give you guidance for that process. Then we have WriteShop Junior, and that's for children who are a little bit older, more fluent in reading, and it allows them to now think about taking the creativity of what they are reading and applying it in their writing. And then, of course, WriteShop for teens is WriteShop 1 and 2. And this gives students the opportunity to hone their writing skills successfully. We have some things to talk about with placement. The one thing I think that's important for us to emphasize is we want you to place your student at the level of their thinking, not the level of their output. And so you may have a child who has no writing experience whatsoever, but they're 5th or 6th grade, and you're thinking, oh, perhaps I should start in the primary level. If they're reading at a 5th or 6th grade level, you definitely want to look at the junior skills. Lisa, what else do you have to say?
Yeah, when you go to the WriteShop website, if you hover your cursor over the products link up at the top of the page, you'll see the 3 levels drop down. Click on any level and it will take you to the main overview page for those 3 levels within that section, and scroll down until you see the skills chart. That's tremendously helpful. It shows you exactly the writing skills that are taught in each of those 3 levels within that section. You can do the same for primary or junior or WriteShop 1 and 2. And that skills chart is really going to be helpful for parents. In addition, you can scroll a little further down on the overviews page and see a sample lesson for any of the levels. One of the things that I wanted to say about WriteShop is that I was not a confident writing teacher when I homeschooled. I used a number of different language arts programs, and they all had good points about them that I really liked, but none of them made me feel like I had the tools that I needed to not only teach individual skills in writing, but to offer constructive feedback to my children. I could look at their writing assignments and say, I could maybe present a grade, I could correct grammar and spelling, but when it came to the creativity of writing, I was really at a disadvantage myself personally. I didn't feel confident, and I wished that I had something that gave me those tools. And when we acquired WriteShop and I started to go through it, I thought, where were you? I needed you. Makes me kind of want to go back and do this again. But this is equipping parents so well. So if you are not a confident writing teacher, this is the product for you. I am so impressed with it. And not just in teaching the skills, but in offering that feedback. When a student hands in a paper, you're going to be able to go and look through it and tell them more than just the technical aspects of writing that need to be improved. I also love that it spends a good deal of time with each lesson before they actually put pencil to paper. They're going to be brainstorming, and this is really getting those creative juices flowing. There are pre-writing activities and skill building activities well before they actually start writing. That's awesome to me. I mean, I had no idea that you could do those kinds of things, and that's what this is providing. It's also, if you have children that are reluctant to put pencil to paper, because there are a lot of different components to writing. You have to put spelling and grammar and punctuation and the actual mechanical act of writing and, penmanship. There's an awful lot to think about. We want to take all of that stuff out of the equation and let that child begin to verbally communicate with you ideas for creating stories and learning how to put a story together with a beginning and a middle and an end. And so if that if writing becomes an obstacle for that child to doing what you really want to do, then it's perfectly okay for them to dictate to you and you perform as their scribe or do a talk to text type of thing. Or even if a child is comfortable at a keyboard, let them keyboard. This is not a penmanship course. We want to get the creativity going. We want to let their brains just blossom with the ideas for writing stories. And this program is just marvelous in doing that.
One of the things that I heard from parents this summer is often creative writing programs dictate what you're going to write about. And in my world, I have zero interest in baseball, but I very vividly remember one of my kids in one of their creative writing programs was required to write an essay about baseball. And man, we had to wrestle that thing to the ground because both of us had zero interest in that. If that's what you have experienced, let me encourage you that WriteShop is a very different experience.
Yeah.
If you have a child who has a love for pandas, they can spend their entire academic year writing about every aspect of a panda, from creative writing to fictional writing to expository writing to everything. And that is such a difference maker, because if your child has an interest in it, they're much more likely to stay engaged. Lisa, I think this brings us to the end of the overview, which we've managed to do in the time we wanted to allot to ourselves. I just want to make sure that parents know how to get in touch with us if they have questions about this. And then we're going to move into addressing the questions that you all have asked. Lisa, did you have any observations to make for parents about how they could get back in touch with us?
Yeah, let me tell you, you're looking for good customer service. You have found it. This customer service team is the best, and they are globally known. And I'm not just making that up. I'm not exaggerating. We have customers using Demme, Matthew C. and our other products all around the world. Some of them are military families stationed globally. Some of them are missionary families. We also have international versions of Matthew C. available, and they purchase from their own distributors, but they call us for placement and support. And our customer service team is the best there is. Everyone has either homeschooled their own children or they are currently homeschooling. They know these products like the back of their hand, and they love to support homeschooling families. So please don't hesitate. You can either call the 888 number that's there on the slide. You can email us at customerservice@demmelearning.com. We also have live chat windows available in any of our websites during our business hours, so you can live chat with us. So please don't hesitate. We love to support our homeschoolers. And by the way, if you are stuck on a math problem, if you have a question about a sentence in the spelling you see, you give us a call. We support our products. We don't just sell them to you. We are there to back them up and to help you if you have any questions along the way.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. So much of what is available to us in the homeschool world comes with a ticket cost. And that ticket cost is, now you've purchased the materials, it's up to you to figure out how to use them. And we at Demme Learning want to support you in your journey. Part of the reason we're doing this webinar today, but we're here long-term to help our families be successful. And we feel that that is the most important thing. I'm going to stop the slide share now, Lisa, and I'm going to turn our attentions to these questions. And I'm going to ask that we're going to see if we can get through most of them. And we'll see where we go from here. The first one is, should I place my Matthew C. child in Alpha or AIM? And we get this question often. So let's briefly unpack what the difference between the two of them is and how you're going to ascertain the best placement for your student.
Right. So Alpha is designed for a student who is just beginning their formal math education. They're going to be learning about place value. They're going to be learning about single digit addition and subtraction with the memorization of the facts. They're going to learn how to convert a word problem into an equation. And so this is for a young child that's just learning that for the first time. AIM is designed for an older student, at least 8 years and older, who already knows how and when to add and subtract. They already understand place value. They can deal with word problems, but they just haven't yet committed those facts to memory. And this will help them do that at an accelerated pace. So that's the difference between AIM and alpha. They are not to be used together. Some people have asked that question too. Should we be doing AIM and alpha? No, the AIM has taken the fact portion of alpha and it is delivering that alone to the student, but it's doing so at an accelerated pace and with accelerated language for an older student.
Right. It's, as we say, it's not designed for a first pass through addition and subtraction.
Correct.
AIM is designed for a student who's 8 years or older, and that makes a tremendous difference. The next question I want to ask questions about struggling math learners and starting AIM for addition and subtraction with 2 students. And here's where it is extremely vital for you to understand that in the world of math, when it's not working for us, we think it's us. And that's not the case. Math is the only subject where you as the homeschool parent should be teaching your student individually. And the reason is because invariably there's one student who gets it and one student who's struggling to get it. And we don't want to disadvantage the struggling student. So if you are beginning an AIM pursuit or a level of math you see, or multiple levels of math you see, orchestrate your time so that you can spend individual time with each student. And let me also just reiterate one more time. I know Lisa said this. She said, we're going to be a pest about this. If you are using AIM, we are recommending 15 minutes, not more than 15 minutes. Why are we doing that? Because we're asking a student to replace an ineffective habit with an effective one. And we know neurologically that gives them a finite amount of time in their head to be able to make that work. As parents, sometimes we're anxious because it looks like we're taking a step backward. You got to set your anxiety aside and do what's best for your student and give them the time to work through the process of changing that ineffective habit. Lisa, when the next question was, could a 5th grader do 2 levels of math you see simultaneously? And my question about that is, why would you do that to your child? Because that's tough. But more importantly, why do we say that's not the best pursuit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Can understand from a parent's point of view, they might be concerned that their student is behind that word and they're trying to catch them up quickly. You need to think about math the way you would think about constructing a building. Each level needs to be solid before you go and put weight on it. And if you were to begin a building and you got to the 3rd level and someone noticed a crack in the foundation, you would be a wise master builder to say, we're putting the brakes on and we're going to go in and take care of that crack so that we can solidify the foundation before we add any more weight to this structure. And math is so much like that. It's such a naturally sequential topic. It's not like any other subjects in school. You can teach, history and science in any order you feel like, but with math, if it's not taught in that sequence, gaps can occur, and that's what often happens. So what you want to do is make sure that they are mastering each lesson along the way within a level and then each level along the way, because every new lesson depends on mastery of all of the prior ones. So you want to make sure that all of that prerequisite material has been mastered. And the way that Math UC is formatted, it's not grade-based. They're not getting a little smattering of everything every year like you do in a grade-based program. Each level is designed to build on the previous ones. And so they're not going to have the tools that they need. They won't be fully equipped to deal with that 2nd level if they haven't finished the 1st.
Right. I think one of the things that might be helpful to parents if you're weighing options here is next week, we're actually doing a webinar. We do weekly webinars to support our parents in their journey. Next week's webinar is, do I have to teach Math UC the way Steve intended? And I have to tell you, we get this question all the time, and we want to trust parents to be able to have a successful experience. We expect you to interpret how it's going to flow in your household, but we also want your success. The next question that I had was how to motivate my kids. And I'm going to refer you to our blog. We just did a webinar this week on teaching kids with time management skills and helping them understand how to manage their time. And I think if you're looking for motivation, sometimes it's important to recognize that kids need to know how to manage their time. You can find that posted by Friday of this week at demmelearning.com/blog. Every webinar that we do is posted as a vlog in our blog, and we would love for you to be able to find those elements to be able to support your journey. The next question that I have really spoke to my heart because it says, how can I help my son be more engaged in reading? He's believed to have a reading disability and not ADHD. And as Demme's special needs consultant for almost 8 years, I want to say to you that if you have a child who is a fully emerged reader, in other words, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and they show no love for reading, I always think it's important to rule out an eye teaming issue. And what do I mean by that? I'm not talking about whether they can see 20/20. I'm talking about whether their eyes work together the way they're supposed to. And sometimes we see kids who have resistance to reading, and we don't know why. We just think they're unmotivated. I've heard parents say, oh, my son is lazy. And I'm here to tell you there's no lazy child. There's just some detective work that needs to be done so that you can figure out why that child is not being successful. And if that's the case, I wanted to encourage you to find a binocular vision specialist. Those are the 3 words, write them down, binocular vision specialist. That's an optometrist who is further trained in checking to see how your students' eyes team together. And that can be the difference between marginal success and complete success. If you have more questions, of course, reach out to the Demme Learning team because we would be happy to help you get more success there. The next question, Lisa, is an easy one. I'm going to toss it to you. It says, if we complete a level during a school year, do we go ahead and start the next level, or what do we do?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Well, it depends on how you're scheduling your schooling as well. We, for the most part, we schooled year round. Now, during the summer, I didn't do a full course load, but they had to read every day, and we had to do math through the summer. And it usually was maybe 3 days a week. I took one summer off. There was a special circumstance going on in our lives, and I took that summer off. And boy, I said, never again. We got to the fall, and not only had they not progressed through the summer, but now I wasted another whole month reviewing everything they had forgotten through the summer. And so we just never did that again. And they really kind of loved being able to just move to the next level and feel like they were, moving on and progressing. It was highly motivating for my kids to be able to do that. So no matter where we were in the calendar, we would maybe take a week or 2 off if we finished a level and then just dive into the next one. They're not grade-based, so you don't have to worry about that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's really important is to recognize that because of its sequential nature, math builds upon itself. And when we use a lot of these incremental programs, someone else has predetermined how many times a given concept is presented to you. And in that presentation, if the designer of the curriculum decided you needed to see something 3 times and you don't quite have a complete handle on that, and then it drops out of that presentation cycle, your understanding is forevermore incomplete. And that's sometimes when we develop a reluctance to do math because our confidence is undermined. If that's something your child has experienced, there's the opportunity to go back through our placement tool, find the gaps, and revisit those gaps. One of the things I think that is very important, and we just had this conversation in a team meeting earlier this week, where a mom had bought multiple levels because she thought, oh, I'm going to have to go, I've got gaps, I'm going to have to go through all these levels. Here's where our placement specialists come into play and make it possible for you to accomplish something. We want to individualize placement so that you can be successful. Maybe you don't need a whole level. Maybe you need instruction in 2 or 3 concepts. That's what our placement specialists are geared to do, is to help tailor what you need to help your student be successful. And that makes a tremendous amount of difference. Lisa, we had a parent say that she was teaching pre-algebra to a math reluctant student. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about, how do we get to that math reluctant student? I know that kid. That kid lived with me. That's how I found my way to Math UC. But I'm going to let you answer the question, and then I might have an opinion to add.
Yeah, this is kind of a classic one. And the reluctance isn't because they can't do it. It's because what Gretchen just mentioned, there is an area most likely further back that was never quite grasped. And it's a necessary skill to be able to do what you're asking them to do today. And so if they don't have that, if they're not equipped to do what you're asking them to do today, of course, they're going to dread it and they're going to try to avoid it. So the idea is, let's go in and do some assessing. And that assessing will help us determine where gaps might be, and then be able to fill in those gaps, equip that student, give him back the confidence to now take on these new challenges. It is not unusual to speak to a parent of a student going into pre-algebra or algebra 1, and we do an assessment with them, and we find out fractions. It's the classic, it's the culprit all the time. And I think my conversations with people, I'm starting to feel like there are 2 reasons why, and it's kind of a perfect storm. First of all, fractions is the first level where math starts to get very abstract. Before fractions, they're dealing with whole numbers. They are things you can see. And now we're dealing with numbers that are less than 1, and you can't see them. And so that's the first thing. Secondly, if they've been working in a spiral grade-based approach, they have been given little tiny pieces of fractions dished to them in small portions over many years, which disconnects all of those aspects about fractions. And so they haven't made those connections between the different aspects of fractions. With Math UC, we teach everything about fractions in a single level, the epsilon level. And it's a powerful level because we are able to present it concretely. Even though these are numbers that are less than 1, the fraction overlays allow students to work with fractions in a concrete and visual way, just like they do with whole numbers. So they are really understanding, why do I have to have common denominators when I add and subtract fractions? They can see why. Why am I getting a number when I multiply fractions that's smaller than the 2 numbers I started with? That makes no sense to somebody who's only ever dealt with whole numbers before, but they can see it with the fraction overlays. And so they're getting such a strong understanding of fractions, and they're putting all of the aspects of fractions together. When kids don't have that connection, they are sort of resigned to memorizing tips and tricks to solve fractions on paper without the deep understanding. But eventually they forget the tips and tricks, especially when a whole summer has gone by, and now they don't know what to do with those fractions. Well, we want them to be able to have such an understanding of fractions that even if they forget the shortcuts, they can still figure it out because they understand what they're doing. And I have to tell you, I mean, I'm going on and on about fractions, but that's the culprit almost all the time. Student is struggling when they're in pre-algebra or algebra 1, they're starting to show resistance to continuing with the math work. Don't be disheartened. Give us a call. Let us do some assessing with them. Let's find out where the gaps are, fill in those gaps, give them the tools and the equipment and the confidence they need to take on the new challenges.
I think what Lisa has said is exactly right. We see it over and over again where we have kids who are not confident mathematicians. And Math UC, because it teaches the concept and the strategy and the application, gives those kids confidence. I found my way to Math UC with a very reluctant pre-algebra student after we had a lack of success in not 1, but 2 curriculum that particular year. And Math UC was a huge game changer for us. She's an adult now. She's a research biologist. And I have to say, I think Math UC did an enormous amount for me as a math reluctant parent to help that child be successful. And we wish you the joy of this journey. I have one more question, Lisa, that we need to be able to talk to before we conclude. And that was a couple of parents who are working full-time ask us to be able to address, what do you do when you're a full-time parent who has a heart for homeschooling? And we've seen more and more of these parents since the pandemic. And we just want to encourage you that your strategy will be an individualized one, because we need to know what your circumstances are. So there isn't really a global answer to that. But here's where our placement specialists excel. They can help you craft a program that makes sense for your circumstance and help you accomplish what you need to accomplish to have a successful experience. Let me say one more time, there is no cost, there is no obligation for you to have a conversation with one of our specialists, but I think you'll find it's a very worthwhile conversation. Lisa, we're to the end of the questions that were addressed to us that weren't non-specific. So what are your concluding comments to our parents today?
Well, yeah, I look forward to speaking with you. It is really a joy. And I talked to a lot of parents within the last few weeks. Things are getting kind of frantic now because we're so close for some of them to the start of the school year. Some have already begun, but some are still making decisions, and we're here to help you. Don't be discouraged. Every one of us has been where you are. Some of you are brand new homeschoolers. This is your first time, your first year. And it's a journey of learning. You will learn as much as your children do. But we've all been there where you are, and we've all been helped by other homeschooling parents. We are here to do the same for you. We want to support you. You are not alone. If you do have the opportunity to seek out and find support in your local area, I highly recommend it. It was such a blessing to me. I had started homeschooling in New York, and then my husband's job took us to Florida. I had my firstborn going into first grade and a pre-K and a brand new baby, and I knew nobody. And I went to the local library, and I went to a couple of different places, and I finally found a homeschool support group in the area, and they were wonderful. It was the best thing ever. So if you can find that support, if you don't have one locally, you can find online support. There's wonderful groups out there. So please don't hesitate to reach out to other homeschoolers. I have found most homeschoolers to be very, very generous with their wisdom and their experience. But we are here for you as well. Give a call. Cry if you need to. We've all done it. And we're here to support you.
Absolutely. We want to thank you for trusting us with your time. We hope we have answered some questions for you about our products. We hope we've answered some questions for you about your journey. If you are still weighing that journey, let me encourage you to jump in. It is absolutely worth it. As academics change here in the US and the craziness continues where they can't find teachers, and we see things like classrooms of 40 and 50 children, recognize that if you can raise your children, you can certainly educate them. We stand ready to help you, and we would encourage you to join Demme Learning as part of your homeschooling journey. Thank you so much for trusting us for this time, and we hope to speak to you soon. Take care, everyone.